Welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, Sam Harris, your host. I invite fascinating humans from all walks of life to share their wisdom and unpack their mindsets and formulas for growth. Hello. Just me on the episode again today, which hopefully you enjoy. I had a good amount of responses from the last one and some nice encouragement to do more of these podcasts where I actually talk and you get to know a bit more about me and the kind of things I think about. And I was reflecting in the last one a few episodes ago about the fact we're on 200 episodes. And actually, I totally messed it up. It wasn't quite 200 episodes. And so we sailed through the 200 mark on the last one and didn't actually do any celebration specifically about it on that one. It was kind of ironic, but actually totally doesn't matter the specifics of when you do things, as long as you actually do take a note to recognize when you sort of achieve a goal, etc. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to celebrate things and not worrying about celebrating perfectly, but making sure we do recognize the successes that happen to us. So let's just dig into it. I could amble about my life, and I generally don't because I get really bored when I listen to other podcasters rambling too much for 5 minutes, although I do quite like actually knowing what's going on in their lives. So I'm going to think about how I can do this in a better way so you can understand what I'm up to, because I am trying to build a podcasting business, which is really interesting, alongside podcasting in general, which whenever I reflect on like the lessons I learned podcasting, these always seem to be very popular episodes, and I think a lot more people are interested about how podcasting works, so there probably will be more content on that coming up soon. But anyway, let's dig into some mindsets and thinking about success. Firstly, I think one thing that's really hard is it can be difficult to understand when we've done something that is good, because we often have an idea of perfection in our minds, and I'm certainly such a sucker for this. I am a perfectionist at heart, and I'm really trying not to be. And it's only because I started to finally get over my perfectionism that I even managed to start running a podcast, because I was really unhappy with the kind of content that I was releasing because it wasn't exactly what I had in my mind. And it was only when I finally just let things go at like 90% perfect, whatever, that things actually got out there. And so I wouldn't have got to 200 episodes if I was a perfectionist. I would have just been stuck at 0. But something I've found is that, one, by releasing the episodes and also doing things like blogs and stuff, is I'll have these episodes sometimes, or these blogs that go out that I'm kind of annoyed with, but I let it go anyway, and I'll put it out into the world. And then people will come back to me and say, wow, that was really good. I hadn't thought about that. And I'm really surprised every time, because in my head, I've thought of like 5 million other things that should have gone into an episode that I wanted to explain in a really cool way. And whatever I've delivered has not matched my expectations, or I just struggled to actually even get there. And I sort of have confused myself in trying to create this perfect thing. And I've ended up like having to throw half of it away and just sort of release something that's a bit simpler, but not as like nuanced or in depth as I'd like it to be. But I put it out there anyway. And what I haven't realized is that what's in my head of all these ideas is not in anyone else's head. They have no idea about any of these things. So I've introduced like a few new concepts to someone and they go, holy shit, this is some new stuff. This is great. I love this. Whereas for me, it's like, oh, it's not as good as this things could have been. And so we don't really think about from the other perspective of someone that's like at a 0 on the piece of information or content that we're putting out there. And it's kind of very blocking to us when it doesn't need to be, because of you actually just need to think from other people's perspectives of they actually aren't in your head. They're not like seeing everything you're doing wrong. They just see the final thing that comes out, and it's probably a new thing to them. But if you spent a lot of time wrestling with an idea, you've kind of become so familiar with it that it's kind of boring and seems normal. But to people that haven't heard what your message might be about, it seems like a really new, cool thing. For example, I wrote a post about the concept of bundling in entrepreneurship, and bundling is essentially picking a few different tools and putting them together under one thing, and it becomes like a service. And so most businesses, if you look at them, are often just the bundling or unbundling of different services. So let's take Substack, for example. Substack is basically a blog on the web. It is a text editor, and it is an emailing service such as MailChimp or something. And it's put them all together, and it's also like a Patreon that lets you sort of take payment from people. So it's like 4 different services in one, and it lets you be a creator who can write their own content and get paid for it, and it gets delivered into people's inboxes. And so that's a bundling of services. Or you can think of unbundling, where you just deliver very one specific thing, like perhaps whilst I'm doing my writing of my blog, something like Grammarly, which just checks my writing to see if the grammar is correct in the spelling. That's like a sort of a singular thing that just does really, really well is checking grammar. That is the unbundling of things to make sure you're just one thing that's perfect. And they have become the best at checking your grammar. And so people use that, even though there are spell checkers in Word, etc. It's just much better. And so businesses kind of go in one direction or the other. And I wrote this post about it and how I'm doing it with my company. And I had like a few extra insights in it. And I ended up sending it out, and I felt like I just delivered this really obvious thing that everyone must already know. But then I had lots of replies from people being like, wow, I'd never thought about this. This is such a cool concept. And they really liked it. But to me, I felt like I sent this really crap, like half-assed post that I just hadn't worked out how to add the extra gold into. So basically, to summarize this whole sort of thing on inner critics in your work is, don't try to be completely perfect, and let yourself do things that might be a bit simpler, and just realize that people don't know everything that's going on in your head. And then it becomes much easier to sort of see that there is value that you're often creating that you're just sort of blind to. And this now leads into the second part of this episode around then celebrating and what to celebrate, because as humans, we're not very much evolved to be content. If you ate a biscuit and it was delicious and then you're just happy forever around hunger, you would never eat again and you would die. If you had sex once, for example, and you reached an orgasm and you just felt in this bliss state for the rest of your life, you'd never bother to try and have sex again, and you wouldn't have any kids, and the evolution of your genes would stop. You kind of need to develop the hunger for food and sex again, so you keep on doing them, and so you live and you procreate at the core fundamental level. But this sort of goes into everything else, as in you are designed to kind of stop being happy, to go and push yourself and try out things and keep developing as a human. And so this makes it quite hard to actually stay happy or see things that should make you happy when you succeed at a longer period of time, and you sort of compare yourself upwards to what people are doing better than you, rather than thinking about how far you've come. And people talk about this a lot in entrepreneurship and as a creator, because there's no structure around you telling you what to celebrate. You just keep on setting your own goals. And when you achieve them, you've already achieved them, so they don't seem that special. So you just have to sort of set bigger and bigger goals. But that means you're never spending any time in the happy state. You're constantly in the striving, struggling state of feeling a bit like a failure. And that's not a good thing. For example, when you're starting a business, the first thing you're trying to do is, okay, I'm trying to get some customers, or I'm trying to raise like a small amount of money. And then you get those first customers, or you raise like your first sort of 20k or 50k, and you get more stress because you're like, crap, I've got to deliver a great experience to these customers. I've got to get double my referral of customers each month. And okay, I've raised this 50k. I've got to spend this in the best way in the next 6 months so I can raise my bigger round of funding. And so at each level, you don't feel happy and content. You kind of just get more stressed. And then you see people who have raised their seed round of funding and you're like, shit, I need to raise 3 million. And then you go and raise your 3 million. And then there's the people that have raised their series A. And you're like, wow, one day I'm going to be as good as these people. And you're not really ever stopping and smelling the roses because you're not really designed to. You're constantly trying to get to the next point. This is overwhelmingly depressing and doesn't really help you at all with like life contentment. And whatever you're doing is supposed to be putting you into flow and making you feel happy during your life, as opposed to some point in the future that you never actually recognize because you kind of sail past it because you're too busy looking at the next thing in the future. And it's really difficult anyway, but even more so as a creator or an entrepreneur. We often get told to think about like our priorities. So when we are working on things, we're kind of often working in like the urgent and important box of like sort of these massive fires that are burning that we really have to like sort out right now or things fail, or trying to work on the important, not urgent things. And these can be hard because they're not about to immediately change something. They're like more long-term things. And ideas like celebrating stuff fall into the non-urgent category for us in our heads, even though we know it's probably an important thing to do. And some people don't even think it's important. And so it always gets put on like the back burner with like the main crazy stuff right now that we have to deal with. And it's very hard to make yourself prioritize it. But if you look at things over, let's say, a year, if you're not celebrating as an entrepreneur, a creator, and let's say you've got a team around you and you're not giving them anything to celebrate and stuff, it becomes very disappointing and depressing as a team to work in when you're just always in this state of stress, and that's not healthy. It doesn't make it an enjoyable place to be, and it makes you feel like you are constantly failing as well, because if you're always behind on targets, you're always sort of struggling. And so it just gives this feeling of like anxiety permanently within you when you aren't stopping to celebrate and be like, okay, we have done some good things. There's cool stuff going on here. And so if you think about your priorities, you're always working on the urgent fires and the burning stuff. If you think about the fact that your whole sort of system of doing things is going to like feel like a noose around your neck and develop this anxiety and make you so depressed that you're burnt out and make your team leave you because they don't like being there because you're not celebrating, it starts to feel more urgent. So if you think about celebrating as like a really important priority because it's a massive fire of depression and terrible things going on as a creator for you, then it suddenly moves into the urgent box for me. So it then made me realize, okay, I do have to celebrate. I do have to tell people when they've done a good job. I do have to tell myself that I've done a good job. I have to have events in the diary where we sit and we go, hey, we've achieved all of this month or this quarter, and we kind of just reflect about how far we've come. And then it becomes a bit nicer to be there and doing things. It's so easy to tell people to celebrate stuff and to tell yourself that you're going to celebrate stuff. It's just so hard to then make yourself do it. And like, another example of this, perhaps that leads into the perfection things that I was talking about earlier, was I just recently realized that I'd set my goal of running an ultramarathon this year, and I'd booked this one ultramarathon that was, well, this was last year now. So I'd booked an ultramarathon in Poland that was like 110 kilometers through mountains, and I'd never run a real marathon even before. Like, I'd never run like the 40 kilometer version. And so this was like stupidly ambitious, and my actual goal was just to run any ultramarathon that's longer than a marathon. But I also had this one in the diary, so that was kind of what went into my head as like what I had to achieve. And so even just running a normal marathon didn't even feel like a thing at all. I didn't even bother to book one. I just ran one out my back door and I managed to do it. That was the cool achievement. And I didn't really think about it at all. It literally just went into my head as a warm up. And I booked a few other ultramarathons along the year that all got cancelled because of coronavirus. And I wasn't sure if I was even going to be able to make it to Poland because it was literally right next to Christmas. So like the dates were a bit stressful as well. And so in November, I ran my first ultramarathon again out the back door. I literally ran from my house up and around the hills, and I ran 65 kilometers, which is a really long way for someone that's never really run an ultramarathon before. And I also did it completely unsupported. So normally when you run these marathons, there's like a checkpoint every 10 kilometers where you can pick up water and food and things and like decompress. And like I carried that all on my back. So I was carrying like over 5 kilos when I left the house, and I went up some really big hills. So that was actually huge. But I mean, during the time, I really bloody enjoyed it. I cried a bit from like the beauty of hills around me just because of Runner's High and like music and stuff. And I had a great time. When I got back, everything hurt and I was super content that I'd done it. But like, I didn't really stop that much other than like that night I basically went to bed straight away because I was tired. And the next day I didn't even think about it at all. And I was already sort of thinking about this Poland one, and like, I didn't even really bother to tell people much about it. I just put it on Strava. I was like, oh, cool. Well, that was done. And the fact that I just ran my first ultramarathon, which is like more than 99% of humans have ever done in their lives in terms of distance of running, like literally was just like water off a back. I didn't engage with that at all. It was just sort of on to the next thing. No pat on the back for myself, nothing. And exactly like a week later, I was like, holy shit, I've just done something really insane, because like I sort of told a few people about it who were like, holy crap, Sam, that's amazing. How have you done that? And I was like, not at all kind of engaging with it and obsessed about this sort of bigger marathon that I'd set myself for, which I then wasn't able to do last year because coronavirus has made the flights too difficult. I wasn't going to be able to get home and actually like attend Christmas and things. And also I was actually super stressed because I was just working too hard, and I just need to spend a few weeks not doing anything rather than trying to deal with stress of travel and running around. So I actually like stopped and realized that, hey, I'd done something super awesome. I could be super content. I ticked my box of running an ultra marathon that year and did something really crazy. And in some ways more crazy because I just did it by myself with like a shitload of stuff on my back, as opposed to taking a ticket to an event, which is on a special day where there's like a bunch of other people around me that sort of all go at the same start gun. I set my own start gun all by myself and just did it, which is kind of, now I realize, like a really amazing thing to go and do. And so the point of this story was just to say that it's really hard to notice when you do something awesome, and you can do something like at that level, but just be completely blasé to what you're doing. So there's probably a lot of things going on that you're just not even noticing at all, that are maybe less than running an ultramarathon, maybe more, but I can ignore this. And I'd like to think I'm someone who meditates and journals every day and thinks about his life and is introspectful. If I could be that blind to things that I do that are good, there's probably some stuff in your life that is worth celebrating somewhere, whatever it is. Whether you used to be on a couch and now you can walk further and do like a 5K, or whether it's not a fitness goal, but like you tried hard something else. There's stuff that you've done. There's probably people that like you and appreciate having you around, that you don't realize how useful you are to them, or the amount of value that you've created with your business or other things that you do in life. You don't have to be running a business. You might be an employee, but you might just be bloody lovely to be around and super useful. There's stuff that you should just be happy about and realize that you can be a bit more content, is essentially what I want to say. And yeah, I think I've covered most of all my points now. And now just trying to sort of make myself recognize that I've now done 200 episodes. This is the 201st. We're now into the 200s, and this podcast has been going for 5 years, and that's kind of amazing. At the time I started this podcast because I was just doing so many different things that I'd start and then stop. I was just running around like failing at lots of different businesses, some things kind of working out, but I just didn't have anything permanent in my life, basically. And I started the podcast because I thought maybe it would be something that I could keep doing and would be a hobby that had a point, but I could really enjoy doing it and I could keep it going. And there wasn't really much beyond that as a goal besides just enjoy myself, but do something that's worthwhile and keep going and make myself keep growing in ways. And that's what I've achieved. I've been able to meet lots of awesome people, and I've become much better at interviewing people. I've developed so much more confidence in speaking myself. Like the first 50 episodes, I was super anxious about saying anything by myself. And now I've just recorded this 20-minute interview with myself without anyone asking me questions, just doing it. I've done like a TEDx speech. I've done stand-up comedy, all things that seemed like completely nuts to me 5 years ago, which is really cool. And I've somehow managed to have an audience. There's like 10,000 of you that seem to listen to me every week, which is amazing. So thank you so much to all of you lovely people for attending these episodes and subscribing to the podcast. This is an absolute joy to be running, and still amazing that these people, you listen to me. So thank you. And I'm trying to push myself more. So I've been largely doing similar stuff for the past 100 episodes. And so as I said, I want to do more episodes like this where I try and break down my different ideas on the world. Like I said, I was doing so many different projects because I basically have a bit of attention deficit disorder and I constantly have ideas. And so I've been running a newsletter for the past 8 weeks called Explosive Thinking, which is a little bit about attention deficit disorders. It's about being a creator and finding your place in the world and creating value whilst also being a bit philosophy and zen and making yourself feel happy about stuff. Kind of like exactly what I just spoke about today was an example of one of the posts that I wrote. So if you go to Substack and subscribe to Explosive Thinking, you can get my thoughts in your email each week, and that would be lovely. Link will be in the show notes. And yeah, as I said, I'm pushing myself as a creator, so I've started a Substack. I'm also going to see what I can do with the podcast in different ways. So I've got quite a lot of recordings coming up for the next 10, 15 episodes, But I'm thinking about how I can do more series where I go into one specific area of mindsets or things of how you think about the world. And I maybe bring on a co-host with me, and we're going to dig into something a bit deeper. Because I think one of the problems with interview style podcasts is they go in so many different directions with every single guest. And that's something that naturally works for me because I just think in so many different directions. But it's nice to kind of train yourself into one area for like a month and sort of dig into something deeper. And that's worked really well for me on the Wiser Than Yesterday podcast, where we go into series where we'll read all the best books on like Stoic philosophy for a month or two. And then we'll read all the best books on investing and money for a month or two. And each episode is a review of each book, but overall we get like a greater picture of things, and it just makes it a bit easier for the listener to like not be jumping around in different directions and have to think about what's going on. It's kind of like cool, if this is the kind of season you're into, you can kind of just like lock in and it's nice. So we're going to be doing a series on how to change yourself and your personality and the ingredients needed for that. I'm also doing a series on death and like the mindsets around death and how we can change our perception of it and celebrate it, and also learning from people near dying. So some weird stuff to start off with, and everything's going to be something mindset based, and it's going to be lots of fun. So that's going to be something to look forward to this year as I try and push myself as a creator. So this has now gone on definitely long enough. I was supposed to cap myself at 20 minutes and it seems to have overrun that. So thank you so much for listening and being a subscriber. It brings so much joy to me, and I hope this episode made you think about how you can celebrate more things in your life and not be such a perfectionist. And if you do like this kind of content, please do subscribe to my Substack, and I will email you each week, and you'll be welcome to send me any replies you want. It'll be a direct connection to me, so that would be great. And thanks for listening. Thanks a bundle for listening. If you liked it, share it, rate it. Remember, growth is all about consistency and persistency, so keep showing up and keep showing love. And if you want to enjoy your life, start by enjoying your day. That means today.